On the 2nd of November, 1859, a young man stood in a courtroom, watching as the jury came in to deliver their verdict. He waited. "Guilty," the lead juror said. The judge then pronounced the sentence, death by hanging on the 16th of December. The young man held his head high and remained stoic as he was led away. The young man was named Edwin Coppock. He was born on the 30th of June, 1835, near Salem, Ohio. Edwin's father died when he was young, and when his mother remarried, the family moved to Springdale, Iowa. Springdale was a Quaker community, a well-traveled stop on the Underground Railroad, and therefore a perfect place for Edwin's mother, a staunch abolitionist herself, to raise her boys. Edwin was described by friends and family as amiable, kind, and fearless. For some Quakers, he was almost too amiable. He was banned from Quaker meetings as he danced too much and he flirted too much. Personally, I think he sounds like he'd be great fun at a party, but maybe those Quakers didn't want good parties. In early December of 1857, a man and his sons came to town and rented a house for the winter. The man was described as a force of nature, intense and determined, yet focused and calm. The man's name was John Brown. John Brown was already famous by the time he wintered in Springdale, Iowa. His nickname amongst abolitionists was Osawatomie Brown, for his stand against a much larger pro-slavery militia near the Osawatomie River in Kansas. He was wanted by authorities, but no one in the abolitionist community was really concerned about turning him in. The Quakers in Springdale were wary of his violent tendencies, but as John Brown spoke in the community, they warmed to him. Edwin heard John Brown speak and watched Brown's men at the house practicing drills, and he soon decided he would follow John Brown into Africa, Brown slang for the South, to free the slaves. Edwin's mother, Anne, was opposed to the idea. She believed Brown was heading into a death trap. Like many Quakers, she was opposed to violence, whatever the reason. But Edwin and his little brother Barclay were determined. They would help free the slaves. So, in the spring of 1858, when John Brown asked the Coppoc boys to come with him to the South, they did. Throughout 1858 and 1859, Edwin, Barclay, and the rest of Brown's men arrived in Harpers Ferry, Virginia. John Brown rented a farmhouse so as not to arouse suspicion, and the men were not allowed to leave the farm during the daytime so that locals would not see them. There they trained and prepared, but the mood was sober. Most knew the folly of such a high task. Most expected that they would die. On the 16th of October, Edwin hugged his brother goodbye. Then Edwin turned and marched out with the rest of Brown's men. One man later recalled that they felt that they were marching to their own funeral. The raid began as several prominent slave owners were taken captive and marched to the engine house. Edwin was posted as a guard, first to the armory and then to the engine house opposite the armory. On the 17th of October, Edwin spotted a man popping out from behind the pumping house, where many of the enemy were gathered. "If he keeps on peeking, I'm going to shoot," Edwin said. The figure came out again. Edwin fired twice. John Brown, who had been watching, said, "That man is down." That man Edwin shot was Fontaine Beckham, the mayor of Harpers Ferry. Written in Beckham's will was the provision that his slaves be freed upon his death. Edwin was, unknowingly, the only man who succeeded in freeing slaves during the raid. By the 18th of October, things were not looking good for the abolitionist raiders. Several of their men, including one of John Brown's sons, were dead. One had been taken prisoner and shot. Several others were wounded. Edwin wrote later that the surviving men could not attend to the wounded men, as there was too much gunfire. Watson Brown, another of John Brown's sons, lay mortally wounded and asked for a bed. Edwin could not provide a bed, but he took off his coat, put it under Watson, and laid Watson's head in his lap. There, in that position, Edwin later wrote, his friend died. Federal Marines were called in to get the situation under control. Their commander, Robert E. Lee, had not even had time to change out of his civilian clothes. As Lee stood outside the engine house, Edwin spotted him and loaded his rifle. For Edwin, it was an easy shot, at point-blank range. But one of the prisoners, James Graham, saw Edwin taking aim and knocked the rifle out of Edwin's hand. Robert E. Lee moved away. The abolitionists' attempt to free the slaves had failed. Edwin and the remaining men were arrested and taken to Charlestown Prison, where they would await trial for treason. Edwin's trial began on November 1st, 1859. His defense was that he had not known of John Brown's plans to raid a federal arsenal. He had believed that they were going south to free the slaves. Nothing more. But, in Virginia, freeing slaves was itself a crime, one they were happy to call treason. On the 2nd of November, Edwin was sentenced to death by hanging. But, oddly, he would not be executed until the 16th of December, giving him plenty of time to write home about his experiences and his convictions. Edwin's uncle attempted to petition Virginia's governor, Henry Wise, to commute Edwin's death sentence to imprisonment. Henry Wise passed the recommendation along to the Virginia legislature, as he said he could not pardon those sentenced to treason. But after the bold abolitionist attack, the Virginia legislature wanted blood. Several of Brown's men, including Edwin's little brother, had already escaped, and the Virginians were unable to find them. The legislature would not allow Edwin to live. Edwin began writing home. It's written in a lot of modern books about the raid that Edwin had given up the cause, and from some of his letters it seems he had. He wrote to his mother saying, "I have seen my folly too late, and must suffer the consequences." But he and his cellmate, John Cook, had devised a plan. While they busied themselves writing to friends and family about how futile the cause was, they were also planning an escape. On the night of December 15th, Edwin pulled out a knife that one of the other raiders, Shields Green, had given him. He carved a hole in the brick wall of his cell. Edwin and John Cook crawled through the hole and crept through the prison yard, unnoticed by the guards. They still had to scale the 15-foot prison wall, but near the prison wall was a large pile of wood. The wood was all that remained of their leader, John Brown's, scaffold. Edwin climbed on top of the wood and was able to grab the top of the wall. He pulled himself over. A few seconds later, John Cook grabbed the wall and climbed over. A militiaman saw Edwin pop over the wall and shouted at him. Edwin did not respond. The militiaman shouted again, saying that if he did not get a response, he was going to shoot. Edwin let go of the wall and landed back in the prison yard. John Cook had been ready to run for it, but realized that neither he nor Edwin could outrun a bullet if the militiaman did shoot them. He, too, dropped back into the prison yard. The pair signed a confession, absolving their jailers of blame. The next morning, on December the 16th, they were marched out of their cells to the scaffold. Shields Green, the man who had given Edwin the knife, had already been executed at 10:30 a.m. that morning. Edwin and John were allowed to say goodbye to their remaining comrades in prison, who were also awaiting execution. They reached the scaffold. After looking out over the landscape, the same that John Brown had surveyed 2 weeks before and had commented on its beauty, hoods were placed over Edwin's and John's heads. "Stop a minute. Where is Edwin's hand?" John said. A guard guided John's hand to Edwin's. They shook hands. It was their last farewell. Edwin's body was taken by his friends, and he was buried in Salem, Ohio. He was 24. In his last letter, written to his uncle, Edwin revealed that he had not given up the cause, the hope that slavery would cease to exist in America. "The cause of everlasting truth and justice will go on conquering until our broad and beautiful land shall rest beneath the banner of freedom. I had fondly hoped to live to see the principles of the Declaration of Independence fully realized. I had hoped to see the dark stain of slavery blotted from our land, and the libel of our boasted freedom erased, when we can say in truth that our beloved country is the land of the free and the home of the brave. But by the taking of my life and the lives of my comrades, Virginia is but hastening on that glorious day when the slave will rejoice in his freedom, when he can say, I too am a man.